Now, I can't imagine why this is, but when I look back at a variety of Yom Kippur sermons I've given at this time over the years, I'm shocked how many times they begin with references to food. Leaving a favorite restaurant 2 weeks ago, Ellen and I were reintroduced by a mutual acquaintance to a local VIP we'd once dined with years ago. On this night, the fellow who we were reintroduced to, was quite drunk. Shaking my hand, he proclaimed himself a staunch supporter of Israel. He then veered to other political topics. While I was disinclined to engage, Ellen was less patient. And she politely disagreed with the man. Sensing the impasse, the guy abruptly switched the subject. He complimented Ellen on her eyes. About my eyes, he added nothing. Though maybe that's because of these thick glasses. Moments later, the awkward encounter ended. It remains troubling. Ellen does have lovely eyes. And they have absolutely nothing to do with her knowledge, skills, or depth. This wasn't exactly a #MeToo moment, but that needn't be the bar. It still felt ugly, retrograde, and belittling. Finding little common ground, he sought to make peace by judging a woman on her appearance, thus separating himself even further. The conversation was over in a few moments, yet it left a lasting impact, for it underscores a vast gulf that continues to divide our society on numerous issues. Still, the takeaway can inspire us. That is, being Jewish helps America. Let me explain. We all face choices. Earlier today, we recited a prayer explaining that our fates were written on Rosh Hashanah and sealed on Yom Kippur. Why the wait? Why the 10-day interregnum? Because the process of making change is contemplative by design. Rather than being hostage to rash decision-making, we are given an opportunity to reflect on how we wish to behave, what we wish to be. The same opportunities apply to our nation and the choices America faces. Some leading opinion makers worry that our democracy is increasingly imperiled. New books and articles on this subject abound. This is something to be taken seriously. Autocracy and the concentration of power and wealth are on the rise in many lands, including here. So too, there's a sense that should we not speak out, we'll be complicit in our nation's demise. There's a belief we cannot afford to remain silent. Jews try not to remain silent. Beginning with our forefather Abraham, who called God to justice, demanding, "Shall not the judge of the earth deal justly?" We speak truth to power. Admittedly, it's in our greater self-interest to do so. This prayer, the Unatana Toka from earlier today, asks, who will be calm and who tormented? Wisdom teaches that those who sleepwalk through a crisis, reap the whirlwind. Yet before we loudly pronounce American democracy dead, it's worth re-examining how it has lived. It turns out America's like a Jew on Yom Kippur. It's not only a history of saintly blessing. There's also a past full of wrongdoings. So America too must say, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, that our national story is replete with deceit and hypocrisy. Each person is created in God's image. But that didn't stop us from wronging others. Pick a period of time. Pick any period of time. You'll find subjugation or discrimination. Consider the treatment of Native Americans, abrogated treaties. African Americans, slavery and Jim Crow. Japanese Americans, internment camps. Add to this the experience of Chinese Americans, or Hispanics and Latinos, or American Catholics, Jews and Muslims, or women, or LGBTQ persons. In the early 1920s, some of my family wanted to emigrate here from Cabrin. At that time, membership in the Ku Klux Klan was 15% of our national population. Actual membership, 15%. Klansmen held 11 governorships, 16 U.S. Senate seats, and 75 seats in the House. Immigration laws were passed in that decade to keep groups such as Jews out. Parts of my own family amongst them, likely parts of yours too, kept out. Nowadays, too, with families separated and children incarcerated, there's much to atone for and to remain vigilant against. We who call God Avinu, our parent, we who teach our children Hinei Ma Tov, how good it is when families dwell together in unity, Shevet Achim Gam Yachad, we stand for certain values. Ashamnu Bagadnu. I have faith we will own up to our collective mistakes. To be sure, those less affected find it easier to want to move on. But half-hearted repentance is doubly ineffective. In contrast, honest self-reflection will deepen rather than diminish our appreciation of America and her progress. Each wave of newcomers and each expansion of acceptance has engendered backlash. That's why in his farewell letter, the late Senator John McCain of blessed memory, Senator McCain beseeched us to be a nation of ideals, not blood and soil. McCain wasn't blind to nativism and the worst of our history. Instead, he understood it's better to unite as our best selves, acclaiming our diversity of origins and identities. Yale Law School's Amy Chua and Jed Rubenfeld offered a similar point in the current issue of The Atlantic. They observe, they say, for all its flaws, the United States is uniquely equipped to unite a diverse and divided society. Alone among the world powers, America has succeeded in forging a strong group transcending national identity without requiring its citizens to shed or suppress their subgroup identities. In the United States, you can be Irish American, Syrian American, or Japanese American, and be intensely patriotic at the same time. We take this for granted, but consider how strange it would be to call someone Irish French or Japanese Chinese. Thus, friends, e pluribus unum, out of many, one, our national motto. Jewish tradition likewise promotes an open tent. The Torah describes how the leaders of Babel wanted homogeneity, a single language, culture, and task. The project failed miserably, and Babel was confounded. For God rejects conformity and exclusion. Heeding this teaching, we Jews have stubbornly maintained our own pathway from generation to generation. That's why we're here now, observing this holy day. This right to be different, as part of a subgroup identified with Jewry, ultimately champions blessing far beyond ourselves. That doesn't necessarily make things easy. An old Yiddish proverb, if the Jew is right, he is pummeled all the more. Some of us can still personally recall how nativism and prejudice in America made Jewish lives so expendable during the Holocaust. I can expound on this subject at great length. Let me just summarize attitudes back then as follows. Even at the end of World War II, the United States Army and the American press didn't want to publish eyewitness accounts of the Shoah, deeming them too Semitic. The feeling was that if the war aim was seen as rescuing Jews, soldiers and the public would lose their will to fight. Only America, learning what happened had the opposite effect. We've come a long way. Now there's a U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. Israel's one of our closest allies. Perhaps the Yiddish proverb rings differently. For we've seen how America's greatness lays in teshuvah, its ability to correct itself. Speaking up and sharing that message, we demonstrate how being Jewish helps America. We don't expect kumbaya. Ellen and my chance meeting at the restaurant highlights the challenge. In speaking to other Americans, however, I caution we mustn't scold or belittle the fears of displacement or change, or revile those with little knowledge of our history. For while the lessons of the Holocaust remain central to our frame of reference, many haven't a clue why. A study this past spring found that 41% of Americans and 66% of millennials couldn't identify Auschwitz. Nearly 1/4 of millennials hadn't even heard of the Holocaust. That's a lot of people to engage. Our Jewish commitment in the public square of Zachor, remembrance, thus takes on even greater urgency. For at the end of the day, these are our fellow citizens, the co-inheritors of this precious republic. We need them, and they us. American democracy, sometimes ill, isn't dead. The hashtag #MeToo movement signifies its vitality. Notice the focus on addressing justice delayed. Notice the activism and ongoing dedication. Charges of wrongdoing were directed this past year against numerous powerful individuals, conservatives and liberals, politicians and the media, clergy and coaches, men and women. Sexual predation and injustice, irrespective of gender, were called out. Holding abusers accountable doesn't just protect more innocents, it strengthens democracy. Of course, accusation is not conviction. There can be fabricated charges. The 9th commandment warns us against bearing false witness. The Torah also recounts how Joseph, a foreigner in Egypt, is first sexually harassed by Lady Potiphar and then falsely accused of rape. He's left to languish at length in prison until God intervenes. Might not there be a Joseph maliciously targeted? Still, what's striking since the hashtag #MeToo movement began has been the number of complaints demanding further investigation. And what's distressing is its ubiquity throughout society, including within our own people. Long ago, our rabbis insisted we must never exploit others, nor coerce sexual behavior against an individual's will. The Talmud offers the case of a man who was so fixated and so compulsive, so desirous of a certain woman, that his life became endangered. Doctors were consulted. Narrowly focused on saving their patient, they recommended that the man and the woman that he was obsessed with that the two have relations. The physicians explained, his only cure is that she shall submit. But our Jewish sages would have none of this. Instead, they ruled, she should not yield, let him die. The doctors then offered an alternative plan, proposing, then let her stand naked before him. Our sages were uncompromising. They answered, she should not yield, let him die. When the doctors bargained, so let him converse with her behind a fence. The sages still insisted, she should not yield, let him die. Sanhedrin 75a. This text clearly defends the woman against harassment. It also shows that harassment can take different forms, all unacceptable. That's well and good, yet notice what's missing. The intended target has no voice. She is silent. Was she creeped out by the ongoing stream of inappropriate advances? Was she sickened by the doctor's persistence? We can only guess. Her embarrassment, her pain, her objections aren't mentioned. Her hard truths are never shared. As Jews, like Americans, we have become more inclusive. We're now more aware of our own negligence and the stifling of voices within our midst. Things have changed, but they haven't changed enough. More needs to be done. And that's an inherent challenge. Seeking to avoid responsibility for their actions, in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve try to hide from God. God asks, Ayeka, where are you? In response, Adam acknowledges, I hid myself. Perhaps that's why Yom Kippur is an annual event, because we try to dodge culpability. Because human imperfection is eternal. People hide things. That's natural. In Judaism, we even praise a God who knows each person's secrets. Still, some pain shouldn't remain private. Today's discussion group will focus on analyzing a prayer written by a leading woman rabbi, a hashtag #MeTooGamAni group confession. May we build safe spaces for victims to break their silence, seek justice, and heal wounds. Yom Kippur is for atonement and return. So how about the perpetrators? On Friday, New York Times columnist Michelle Goldberg wondered whether some of the men brought down by the hashtag #MeToo movement, the Al Frankens and some other such VIPs, whether they deserve a second chance. In step with our teachings, Goldberg reasoned, before we do that, though, we should clarify a few things. It's one thing to say that people who have harmed others and feel remorse deserve an opportunity to make amends and shouldn't be pariahs forever. Most people shouldn't be defined by the worst thing they've ever done. There's a difference, however, between arguing that someone merits a second chance and insisting that he didn't do anything all that wrong in the first place.